Hey everybody, it's Jay Wittz from Wittz Gaming, and I'm here with another segment of Wittz Admits, where I talk about something from the video games industry that I thought was interesting. Earlier today, Jeff Gerstmann of GiantBomb.com released an announcement that basically said they're expanding, and in order to expand, they're partnering up with CBS. Now CBS owns Gamespot, so two very big game companies are basically becoming sort of side partners. They're under the same umbrella company, and while they're not working with each other, they're still going to remain their own separate sites. There's one really big issue that makes this all extremely strange, and that's the fact that nearly 5 years ago, in 2007, GameSpot fired Jeff Gerstmann over what's basically one of the most controversial moments that have ever happened in the history of video games journalism. I was there in 2007 when it happened. I've been following this story for a while, and so it's been really interesting that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Jeff Gerstmann says that they're going to talk about his firing, they're going to talk about everything with GameSpot, and after all that, he's coming back to GameSpot to get the resources that he needs to expand his site. It all seems nuts. It makes no sense when you first hear about it, but after hearing him reason with it, and he is a very reasonable guy, it all starts making a little bit more sense. Now, on the first part, just the fact of him coming back to GameSpot, it seems reasonable for his company. Now, Giant Bomb branched off just a few months after Jeff Gerstmann got fired. Him and a couple of other people from GameSpot got together, they started doing their own thing, and so Giant Bomb has been basically entirely different from what you'd expect from one of those traditional big media corporations like GameSpot. Now, some of the things that Giant Bomb do, they have really long-form video, long podcasts, they have vulgarity, they don't shy away from the fact that they want to treat their audience like adults, and they just have all kinds of goofy antics and personal stuff that you just don't get from the same kind of company that's trying to appeal to as many people as possible with as big of an audience. The problem is, when you have a small site, it's really hard to get the funding that you need to get all the different tools that you want to get the best content out. This is one of the big things that Giant Bomb's been having trouble with, and so they've been supported almost entirely through support through premium backers with some extra content that they've been putting out. Now, that's not exactly the ideal situation for them or for the people who support the content, but it's been working really great. The model's been doing just fine for them. But now that they have this new opportunity, they basically, and yeah, I don't know how much money they're getting from CBS, but they seemed extremely enthusiastic about it. They get to move in their office next to the office where all the GameSpot people are. They get all that technology, big rooms with green screen, all this spending money, and Jeff Gerstmann and friends seemed extremely happy about it. So I think having those people who started this very close-knit community to make this move, I think he would have already been confident about making the move over, keeping the integrity of all of his viewers and stuff like that. I'm actually pretty excited because I like Giant Bomb, and for them to have more resources to work with, to me, seems like it would only make for better content. But then the whole other thing comes up. The fact that he got fired, that no one's been able to say anything about it for 5 years, and so everyone's pretty much been at speculation as to what happened. So, what happened? Honestly, the story's not too far off from what everybody was already expecting. How it goes is, back in 2007, the way everybody saw it was, GameSpot had a bunch of banner ads covering up their page talking about the new game Kane Lynch. And Jeff Gerstmann gave a review, I think it was like a 6 out of 10, and he was not happy with Kane Lynch. Just a couple of days after that review came out, maybe it was a couple of weeks, I don't exactly remember, but within that same time frame, he was fired out of the blue. It was a big shock, and so people tried to put two and two together. They saw that Kane Lynch ads were there. They saw that Jeff Gerstmann didn't give it that great of a review. Jeff Gerstmann had been there since 1996, and all of a sudden he's been fired out of the blue. So everybody draws the conclusion he was fired because he gave a bad score to a game that was paying GameSpot. Now, I'm not going to say that didn't happen, and honestly, GameSpot and Jeff Gerstmann didn't really say that it didn't happen either. In fact, in this podcast that they just had, where they talked with each other live and kind of got the whole thing out, it kind of happened that way. Now, I say kind of because it's not like everybody expects. It's not like he just wrote this one review, then all of a sudden he was fired. They had these new managerial higher-ups who weren't exactly fresh to working with editorial, so they didn't really like this idea of negative reviews. They didn't understand or didn't exactly line up with Jeff Gerstmann's opinion of editorial integrity, where you can say what you want to say. And that's how it should be. So they were uncomfortable with Jeff from the start, and they didn't exactly know what they were doing for running the business correctly. Now, this was something that they had a couple of issues over it. It was a recurring thing. It started with a review about a Ratchet and Clank game that didn't get a great score, and while Jeff didn't write that game, he had a high position up in editorials, he let it go through, and so they talked with him in a meeting. So he had a few meetings or two before finally getting the big one where he was fired. And it didn't exactly happen right away after this one incident. So, I mean, the fact still stands. He kind of was fired just due to these managerial people not being comfortable with him and his radical, or so they thought, reviews, and so he got fired that way. But what I really like about all this is that him and Gamespot basically sat down to talk about the whole thing, and they treated it entirely seriously. They brought it all out, left it all up to the open. Jeff was very sincere about everything that went on. He didn't really mudsling at all. In fact, he felt bad that he couldn't say anything because a lot more damage happened that could have been prevented had they just been open about it in the first place. For the first thing, people have been holding this thing over GameSpot's head for the past 5 years just because it happened and they never really were able to back it up. So the fact that nobody said anything about it, people just assumed, oh, well, Gerstmann was fired because he gave some bad reviews, and so now GameSpot has no editorial integrity. Those same managerial people that were there, that were the result of Gerstmann getting fired, no longer are part of GameSpot. They haven't been for quite a while, and so that's not really a factor anymore, and GameSpot wanted to get that out too. They admitted that it was something that happened in the past, that it wasn't something that was good that happened, and that they were moving forward and no longer supported that kind of problem. The funniest thing I thought was that the people who made Kane Lynch actually later came to Jeff Gerstmann and said that they knew their game wasn't that good either. So it just goes to show, everybody had their own opinions, but because he couldn't say anything, none of that could ever get out. Nobody could ever defend themselves, and so people just threw hate everywhere. I just thought it was nice to see this partnership between two very radically different companies, one of them finally coming back after all this controversy, and everybody basically making things up. Now, I know a lot of people at Giant Bomb are kind of worried because Giant Bomb is so radically different than GameSpot, but from everything that I've been hearing from Jeff, it just seems like it's a good business opportunity. They're getting the funding they need, they're keeping their site entirely separate from GameSpot. They comically talked about how he's still allowed to swear, they're still allowed to make whatever vulgar content they want, so honestly, I don't see what's the issue. Basically, one site that's very dedicated to making good video game related content now has more money so they can make more better video game related content. And GameSpot, who's kind of been haunted by this story that people have been talking about for 5 years now, can at least settle that a little bit and own up to it and move on. It all sounds good, and honestly, it's nice to talk about good news for once. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about the situation, either on GameSpot's side, Giant Bomb's side, or whatever you saw from that live stream between both Jeff Gerstmann and GameSpot, and let me know what you think. Until then, have a nice weekend, and I'll see you guys around.